posted a little extra credit item. It's based on a reference that our speaker last week made to Rudyard Kipling's poem, Gift. It's a discussion thread. So what you have to do is click on discussion on the left side when you go in, on that navigator bar on the left, and just go in and read the instructions and post it if you would like to do that. It's totally optional. With that, I'm going to go ahead now and introduce Mr. Brent Boswell. Entrepreneurship takes on many forms, and writing novels and scripts is but one of them. Brent Boswell is a novelist, a playwright, and a director. His production, the Mormon Handcart Pageant, played 8 seasons to over 100,000 people. He has 4 published novels that I'm aware of: The Santa Exclusive, Big Mean Pig, Mission Invisible, The Magician's Curse, and the teen thriller Brothers Bones. He's an alumnus of Snow College, and he has lived in Minnesota, Nevada, and 3 Canadian provinces. He currently shares time between his home in Nephi and his family's cabin here in the Sanpete Mountains. Along with his writing, Brent also enjoys successful side careers in corporate recruiting in Juab County. Have I built you up enough, or do you want me to keep going?
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good? Okay, look good there.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Welcome, Brent Boswell.
I'm really glad to be here today, and I talk loud anyway, so I'm going to try not to overtalk this microphone. But as I mentioned in my bio, I did go to Snow College, and I will say about these bios, I have an opportunity to speak a lot, and it's funny where sometimes they get the information, and some of them I'm like, can you speak at my funeral someday, because that was awesome. And they make up stuff. One said was the world's foremost expert on something, and it's really cool. I should also add that my parents happen to be at Manti today, and they may be dropping in, so if you see a couple old people in suits, don't freak out, it's not the cops. Snow College, you guys, when I was here, it was a little bit different. I was here back in the day with the mullet. How many of you know what a mullet is? Okay, most everybody, and I had the coolest freaking mullet ever. I could pull it clear down around here, I looked so awesome. Back in those days, and the girls would wear their hair up with these big giant bangs. Anybody here from Salina? Nobody from Salina? That good, I can say that. So Salina girls are always the coolest because they could get their bangs up there. I don't know how they did it. But I like that pictures like at the dances, and their bangs are not all in the photograph. It was awesome. So I was here at a really cool time. I don't know what they call it, but when I first came to Snow, I lived at a place called Snow Village. And it was kind of by where Little Caesars is. Well, I mean, there was some happy service back then. And anyway, so I lived in a place there, it was about a mile away. Back in those days, I was really fit, like most of you guys. So I would jog from there, half mile. I would run 13 laps around campus. It's exactly a mile apiece, and run home every day. And it was a lot of fun. But I lived there, and then I left for a couple years. When I came back, they called it Snow Village. And now they're light blue. There's Snow Village in the parking lot of the Activity Center. But that's where I lived. It was anybody live over, what's that called now? Is it still Snow Village? Anybody live there? There's probably still some dirt in the carpet and stuff that I left there. But I enjoyed my time at Snow College. One of the things that Snow College can count on is I continue to receive success as an author and get to be as big and successful as I plan to be. Snow College is on the top of my list for donations. I'd love to hear. In fact, I was almost going to write a post-dated check today for like $1 million and give it to the president, but I thought that might be a little bit arrogant. But I love my experience here. I hope that you do and realize what a great institution this is. And I'll also say that I'm glad you guys are here now at this age. I wish they would have had something like this when I went through college. When I went through, they just trained you to go work for somebody. And this idea of entrepreneurship is a big deal. And I especially wish that I would have known back then of my desire and talent I had to be an author, because I would have done a lot of things very differently, like attend my classes and stuff like that. Before my books get here, I could say that a lot of times my social life got in the way of going to school, and I don't always regret all of that, because there's a lot you learn about yourself by being away from home for the first time. But great place to be, and it's a real honor to be back here. In terms of being an author and an entrepreneur, those terms haven't always been unified. But with modern technology, they're becoming more unified all the time. to start off with, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about how it used to be in the world of becoming an author versus how it is now, and how it opens you up for being an entrepreneur more than it ever has. Back in the old days, before this thing called the internet, and when I was at Snow, no internet. So yeah, crazy. How did you? I know we had these things called books, and you had to go find them and open them up, and there was stuff in there, you know. And so there was no internet back in those days, but what you'd end up doing was you would have this idea for a book, and you'd go through however you figured out how to write it, and you'd write this book, and the whole time you had no idea if it was ever going to be published. You had no idea if it would ever see the light of day. And that would have been a really daunting task for an author, and I think that it held a lot of people back because, you know, you put your blood and guts into this thing, and you have no clue that it'll ever be read by anybody but you. And so it used to be that you'd write this book, and then you would try to find an agent who would represent you. And agents are a lot like a real estate agent today. Your book is property, and if they like it, they think they can sell it, they agree that they sign a contract and they'll list it and try to sell it for you, and then they get a piece of the pie once it's sold. And then they would sell it on to a publisher who, if the publisher liked it, bought into it, then they would put this huge process to try and figure out how to one day make it a book. The whole process took years. And so it was really a hard thing for people to decide about whether or not they want to be an author, just because, you know, all this work, and it would likely, statistically, wouldn't pan out to be anything. And so, as I went throughout my life, I reached a point where I thought that I wanted to be an author, but I pictured myself writing like religious Stockard books. And I was pursuing a career that would lead to that. And so I went along and made notes and everything, was preparing to write these kind of books one day. And during this time I had a dream of just this quirky, funny, fictional story, dreamt the whole thing out, and it took place at Snow College. And I thought, man, this is the greatest story ever. And see how Snow College affected me. It's in my dreams, like years after I left. And so I named this thing the Badger Den, and that was supposed to, is there any male housing called the Badger Den? Yes. Is there really? So when I was here, there wasn't. So this book is about a place called the Badger Den. It was this historic building. They were going to tear it down. And it turned out to be extremely cheesy and lousy. And by the way, I got some stuff I got to give away as we go. But it turned out, who said that about the Badger Den? Right there. Suede Brent Boswell t-shirt, they're all the rage. and I see my folks up here, which is kind of good, because maybe they're home watching on YouTube, and that's good, because then there'll be at least one person watching it at home. But anyways, so I wrote this book. I thought it was awesome. The story was okay, but I was writing it for a local publisher, you know, a Deseret book up in Salt Lake. And in those days, a lot of the books that they did were just extremely cheesy, and they ended way too easily. There was no long-term damage done. Pretty cheesy, and this book was exactly like that. It was really funny. But I wrote this thing about Snow College, and I had a fun time because I revisited in my mind all the funny, crazy things we used to do. And I wish this wasn't. I wish I could just tell you funny Snow College stories, and you could tell me yours, because it was a blast down here. A blast. But anyways, I wrote that thing, and I sent it out to publishers, and sure enough, they rejected the dog out of it. You know, so like I'm telling you, you go through all this work, how do you know if anyone's ever going to read it? And there's a good chance that they won't. And it's the same with any entrepreneur project. You know, you put your blood, sweat, tears into something, but how do you know if anyone will ever want it or want to buy it? You know, and that's one of the principles of entrepreneurship, is to find out in advance the kinds of things that people are buying and find an author. So anyway, so I kicked that book out. It finally got rave reviews from my family and relatives and stuff like that. But that was about it. So after that, I decided I've got to do a little more research and find out what's popular right now. What are people reading? They're my folks right now. Everybody turn around and look at my parents. Yeah, they made it. So that means YouTube visitors, 0. Might as well turn the camera off. I look good on camera. You guys go home and watch it. You think I look good now? Wait till you see me on camera. But anyway, so it made me realize that I've got to do a little more research and find out what's popular. And as I did that, I started to find out about this this thing where you could publish your books online. I thought, oh, that's lame, that's cheesy. They called it, if you used to self-publish, they called it vanity publishing because it meant that you were so arrogant that you didn't need if someone turned you down, you were better than that anyways, and you just go ahead and publish your own thing and that kind of stuff. But so I did pursue it. I thought, I still got to do this like I was telling you. I got to get an agent, got to get a publisher, got to do this the traditional way. And then you have these visions of when you get published, they're going to start flying you out to meet with Letterman, or you're going to be, in all those awesome talk shows and all that kind of stuff. And so I was writing and learning. I'd start doing some more books, start sending them in, get them rejected, polish them back up, send it back in, get it rejected. I mean, over and over again, you just get rejected like crazy. And it's that way no matter what your product is, that there's always that period of doubt where, is anybody going to think that what I'm making or the service I'm providing, is anybody going to think that it's good enough? And so, going through this process, but part of it is, as I got studying, I learned, almost all famous authors had a lot of rejection letters. At this time, the Twilight, how many of you guys have read Twilight? Anybody want to admit that? Let that one give me for good. Stephanie Meyer was coming online. She was a lady who had studied literature and English in college. She didn't plan on being an author. She had a dream also of Edward in the field, and his chapter, whatever in the book. He's sparkling and all that stuff. She couldn't get it out of her head, so she woke up and wrote it down just so that she would forget this cool dream that she had. And it just started fleshing out into a book. Well, she writes this monster book. She didn't do any of the research I'm telling you to do. It's too thick. She starts sending it out, and it's getting rejected all over the place. And part of the reason it was rejected, she hadn't done her research. She'd written a book for teenagers at a time when teenager books were like this thick instead of this thick, right? And so people were rejecting her all over the place. She happened to send it to a publisher that had an intern that was screening the books. And when this intern found the book, the intern fell in love with it and showed it to her boss. And the boss didn't realize how long it was. The boss read the first few chapters and said, wow, this might be something. And they pursued it. Otherwise, Stephanie Meyer, none of that would have ever happened. A lot of you would have felt really good about that. But I admit, I read the books and really liked them. I've seen the movies. And in the meantime, Stephanie Meyer is extremely well off today. But so a lot of times you get rejected and you just keep trying. And finally what happened to me, this was right during the time of the recession. It was right when ebooks were first coming popular. How many of you guys would read ebooks instead of paperback? Okay, a lot of you do. So it was really a time of uncertainty then, that people didn't know what's going to happen. And in the meantime, ebook sales were flying, up the charts. Paper books were going down, and so publishers were losing money because they print all these books and now nobody wants to buy them in paper. So it was really a difficult time to get published, and that's unfortunately where I was. If I started down with you guys, I'd already had my name on the library out here, right? And so, anyways, it got to the point where I was trying to get published like Deseret book, and they have an arm that sells regular non-religious books too, and called Shadow Mountain. And they've had some successful authors, Brandon Mole and some others, the Fable Haven series, and some of those have gone through these guys. And so I was trying to get published with them because I thought it'd be a little bit easier, they're local. And so I wrote the book that is now called Brother Bones. And then it was called Scout's Honor, and it had a lot of kind of Boy Scout propaganda in it that would help promote the Boy Scouts, I thought. So I sent this in the Deseret book. They usually get back to you 2 or 3 weeks. And they didn't get back to me, and so it's considered poor form to call them, to follow up. But I thought, God, the entrepreneur in me, you got to make things happen, right? And I thought, I know it's poor form to call, but I'm gonna call these guys. And so I called my contact there, and she said, "You haven't heard anything?" And I go, "No." And she, "Oh, Brent," she goes, "This is way above me." She said, "Your book's gone. It's up on the corporate level." She said, "I thought you'd hear back." And I'm like, "Sweet." She goes, "I'm going to call them, I'm going to find out, I'm going to come back." And what that means is when it gets to that level, they have a boardroom and they'll have the CEO of the company and all of the bosses, and the person who designs the covers, and the person who does the editing, and the marketing people, and they all get together and they all come and pitch their favorite manuscripts they've received lately, and then they'll try to see out of thousands and thousands that boil down to which handful are we going to publish. Well, mine reaches this level, And so now I'm all excited because this conversation I had with this lady. And a few days later, I get a very customized letter in the mail, but it said all kinds of nice things about me and my book, but it's also a rejection. At that level, I got rejected. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so I thought, you know what? This is becoming a case now of economics, not as much that my book's lousy. There's a lot of reasons why you get rejected, and only one of them is your book is lame. The rest of them could vary from all kinds of different reasons. And so as an entrepreneur, I try to focus on that, you know. Why did they reject it? And it turned out that they were worried because of the heavy Boy Scout stuff in it, that it would only be interesting to the people who were scouts, which they were right, I should have realized that, and therefore my market was little. So I took the same book, I went in and deleted out a bunch of the scout references, there's still some in there, and I started kicking it out to the national market. And I thought at this point, it's so hard to get in Desert Book, it seemed no easier locally than it did somewhere big, at major publishers and agents. And so I started looking on the internet. Thankfully they had that at this point in my life. And I was finding New York Times best-selling agents who were representing authors who wrote books like I write. And so I started submitting to them. And before long, I started to get, again, rejection letters, but again, they were very customized. Mr. Boswell, we want you to know how much we love your book. I'm sorry that I didn't get back to you sooner, but I have had this on my desk for a month, and I am just trying to find a slot for it. I love it. I think you're a talented author, but I already have one or two like this already that I haven't been able to sell because of the market. And so therefore, it's not fair for me to take your book and sign a contract with you. I just don't know how I could sell it, but it's an awesome book. And so I started getting letters back from that. And then again, the entrepreneur in me kicks in and thought, okay, you know, again, there's 9 reasons why my book could get knocked out. Only one of them is lousy. And I've got New York Times best-selling agents telling me my book is awesome. And they don't have to do that. Normally you get, have any of you ever even thought about publishing a book? A couple of you have. Okay. Usually the letters you get, has any of you ever submitted for publishing before? Not yet? Some of you are close. Usually the letters you get are like a 50th generation photocopy that says, you know, sorry, we can't represent you at this time. You know, dear sir, madam, or dear author, and they're kicking these letters out to you. So when you start getting a letter that's you know, specifically typed for you, they didn't have to do that. Out of the 50,000 submissions they got that year, they take the time to write only a few rejection letters like that. So the entrepreneur in me said, okay, the books are here, the problem is the economy and uncertainty about what's going to happen with ebooks. Maybe I better revisit the concept of publishing these by myself and just doing these on Amazon. And so, again, you have to put your entrepreneur hat on at this point. Which is challenging because most artists, and you could argue that writing a book is art, most artists are, the creative people usually aren't the business people, right? Usually if you're really creative, you know, salesmanship isn't your strong point. That's where a lot of authors struggle, and that's why as an entrepreneur, if you manage to have both skills, whether you're born with them or learn them or both, if you can be an entrepreneur and an artist, you have a higher chance of success, because once these things are written, somebody's got to go out and sell them. And so I started to realize this, and one thing that I did possess was the business side. You know, as it says in my bio, I also do corporate recruiting for Juab County, and that puts me out with incoming businesses, and I meet with them on a daily basis, and I deal with a lot of multimillionaires and try to help them decide to locate their business in my community. And so I have the business side of it, and also I've worked on gaining the creative side, and that makes it possible for me to become an entrepreneur and an author at the same time. And so as I looked through this process, I thought, now maybe I could you know, do this myself and see what happens. And so I thought I'd take my least valuable manuscript, because I had this fear back then. Anybody my age and older has this fear that anything you have on the internet is going to get stolen. You know, and you think, what if I send it in, and somebody will steal it some foreign country, and they'll be black marketing these things and selling them and cut me out of my money, you know, which would honestly be really flattering when you think about it, that you're so awesome that we've got knockoffs, right? But anyway, so I had a manuscript that I'd written for a contest. And And I found out about the contest, it was for a Christmas story, and there was like, by the time I found out, there was like 10 days left before the submission was due. So I had a story in mind, I went home and I wrote this book like in a week. And I wrote so fast that usually I have people that edit for me. This time I didn't even have time for that. I'm like, I gotta get this submitted for the contest. And so I called it and it was called what was it called? Something, it was about Santa that had Claus in the title, I can't remember now. And you remember there's a movie called The Santa Claus with Tim Allen, have you seen that? You were little babies when it came out. But they spell Claus like the legal clause, right? And there's a couple of spellings of clause. One is how you spell Santa Claus, and one is how you spell legal clause. Well, me sorry Mom and Dad, having skipped several classes at Snow College, I had somehow been misspelling clause, which is pretty bad when you submit a book. The title is spelled wrong, and the main character is spelled wrong throughout the entire manuscript. So needless to say, I didn't win the contest. I didn't even get a rejection letter at all, as a matter of fact. And so I had discovered that after the fact, and I fixed it. And so I had this manuscript, and I'm like, well, it's probably my least valuable one. Didn't hardly take any time to write it. Let's throw this thing on Amazon and see what happens. So I hired some cover design people. And again, as an entrepreneur and as an author, see, when you get published, that's one advantage is that you're assigned an editor who would catch the misspellings, and there are misspellings in everybody's work. And you would be assigned someone who does the cover, and they would take care of the cover. You get somebody who does your marketing, they take care of the marketing. And all that kind of stuff would happen for you. Well, as an entrepreneur, sometimes you got to figure out how to do it yourself. So you either learn how to do it, or you scrape together the money and hire somebody to do it. And so I did that. I hired a lady to do a cover. She took my idea and made a new cover. It's not this one. Now it was a lousy, stupid cover also, just for the record. But I put it on Amazon, I marketed the heck out of the thing, and that Christmas it was the best-selling short story on Amazon. And I was like, whoa, that's my least valuable manuscript, and I'm like, cruising up the charts at Amazon with this thing. And so then I started to realize, okay, I kind of like having the control. And that's where it gets into being an entrepreneur, is you have a lot of responsibility and all the burden falls on you, but you also have all the control. And that turned out to me to be a really awesome part of being self-employed, that you can make your own decisions. As a novelist, once you send your manuscript in, and it doesn't matter who you are, well, it doesn't matter. Stephen King, how many of you ever read Stephen King? Some of you've all heard of him, right? He writes creepy, scary, crazy stories. Stephen King is so successful that he feels like his words are gold. When he submits a manuscript, the clause is that the editors and agents cannot touch it. They might find a typo or something, but they cannot change a single one of his words. Everything is exactly the way that he wrote it in his book. He's the only author on the planet that can do that. None of the rest of them, no matter how famous they are, have that same cloud as Stephen King. And really, they're smart to want that feedback, because these people are trained to make your book better. But also part of what they do is you send in the book and you've written it a certain way, and say you wrote a book that you don't want to have any swear words in it, Well, the editor could read that and say, yeah, there's not enough swear words in this thing. Kids today need some swear words. And so they're throwing swear words in your book, and they're telling you that's the way that it's going to be, and then you would have to go explain to your mother, how come there's all these swear words in your book, Or they change the cover, they change the ages of your characters, all these kind of things. The book Ender's Game took like 20-something years to become a movie, because they never could find a good script, because every time a scriptwriter get a hold of Orson Scott Card's manuscript, they want to make the character older and make there be a romance story involved. They want him to be in love with the girl that becomes his friend, which screwed the whole thing up. And so Orson Scott Card, because he had the clout, was able to hold out and wait until he could finally get a script approved that kept the hero of the book as a 12-year-old instead of a 17-year-old heartthrob. And so you lose a lot of control when you start getting partners, when you work for somebody else, all that kind of stuff. And so as an entrepreneur, you get to maintain that kind of control. You get to stick with your own heart and do what's right. But you also, as an entrepreneur, have to be really good at listening to other people and getting feedback. As an author, one of the biggest reasons why I've been successful is that I am cool with receiving feedback from people. When I have groups of pre-readers that I send my books out to them, and they have a total surety and guarantee that whatever they say to me, I'm not going to get mad about. I'm not going to freak out about it. Because that's what happens so often. People ask me to read their books and say, what do you think? And as soon as you say, I liked it, but this one part kind of, I didn't get it, and they jump all over you. What do you mean? It's awesome, and you're like, oh, you're right, it is awesome. Here you go, I loved every word of it. Thank you, I knew it was awesome, and they go home and fail. And so as an entrepreneur, you have to find the right people and then listen to the right people when they're right. Okay? I'm going to give you a book, dude. He's laughing at my jokes. Okay? So you've got to find the right people and then listen to them, but only listen to them when they're right, because not everybody's, is right. You've got to go with your gut on a lot of things too. And if you're like that, if you're confident in going with your gut, you gather all the information you can as an entrepreneur, but at the end of the day, who makes a decision? You do. You make it. And that's part of the fun of it, and it's also a big part of the challenge. But that's the same whether you're writing books or whether you're making widgets or apps or websites or whatever you're doing. And I will add, guys, this is a great time in the world to be an entrepreneur. I was reading through a list of all the billionaires, all the people that become billionaires last year. Tons and tons and tons of them are your age. 20, 25, 19. Why? Because of apps. They invented a video game or an app or something like that. You guys have the world at your fingertips because of the computers and the education you're getting and learning how to use them. And so you are an exciting time. So if I started to go forward in this and I started getting this kind of feedback that, hey, my books are good, I really had to start putting on my business hat, I learned how to do it, I learned how to format them, I learned how to get them so that you could read them as ebooks. I had to get them figured out how to put them in a book like this. And then you got the books, and now who's going to sell them? And see, what everybody thinks in the movies, the fairy tales, and whenever there's a movie that the person in there is an author, they're always, have you seen the movie Limitless? It came out, most of you have seen that probably. In that story, right, he's this bum. He's a scummy guy, he's got this scummy apartment, and he's gotten a $50,000 advance for an unwritten manuscript. That is the pinnacle of fiction. Never happens. Never happened. You get advances on finished manuscripts, and usually only if you're already published, But remember, he had this $50,000 advance, and he was such a slouch. You wonder how did he even get that advance, And finally, he finds this magic medicine, right, that he starts taking, and he wakes up the next day and he's awesome, and he writes this really cool book and everything. But in the real world, it doesn't ever happen that way at all. But that's the way Hollywood portrays it, so that we think, oh, if you're an author, they're going to handle everything. Well, as soon as I get published, once I get a letter saying you're approved, you're accepted, you just sit back and wait for the speaking invitations. They come all over the world, they're flying you all over the place. That's the way that Hollywood depicts it, and it's not that way at all. You find yourself at home by yourself saying, now what am I going to do? And the other beautiful thing about technology is that these books can be printed on demand. And so when people go online to buy your books, they buy it, within a few days, the printer prints it and mails them a fresh copy. And so you no longer have that financial risk that you used to have. Before, if you wanted to be a self-published author, you'd have to put out like 10 or 15 grand, you'd buy all these books, and you'd have them piled in your garage someplace, and then one day they would all come, and there they are, and you're like, okay, now what? And if you don't have the entrepreneur flair within you, that's a good question. Now what? How are we going to sell these things? I got 10 grand worth of books sitting in my garage. What am I going to do with them? It's a horrible thing to have happen. What's worse than that, if you did happen to get picked up by a publisher, and most authors that get picked up do not get the special treatment like I'm telling you. At the end of the day, you may have a publisher, you've got some help with your manuscript, you've also lost your freedom, and then they print a bunch of books, and if they don't sell, who gets blamed? The author does. The author gets blamed. And so it really puts you in a bad situation. And so then you're like, okay, that book was lousy. The publisher's got 10,000 of them in the garage. I'll just write another one. And you write and you submit. And what do they say? Taking a chance on you losing. We've got 10 grand in your books in there already. We're not doing another one in your book. So again, having a boss isn't always that great. But if you have 10 grand worth of books in your garage and you're an entrepreneur, then you can start thinking, okay, this is a marketing issue. Who's my target market? Hopefully you know that before you write the book. But who's my target market? Where do these people hang out? How do I reach them? and you start developing a marketing plan, and you go out and you start marketing your own books. And the entrepreneurship side opens it up so that you have that opportunity. And that's what I had to start doing, I didn't have a Facebook account until I became an author. I'm too old for Facebook, right? And you know what it is? Some of you guys have got Facebook. I just got my folks involved. The president, do you have a Facebook account, President?
I know.
See, and he's got more hair than I do. But
My wife does.
so I got a Facebook account. I started using it, giving away stuff all the time, giving away Kindles, gift cards, and basically driving people to share my posts about my books. And before long, they started to, and the sales went up accordingly. I got thinking, man, where this is at is schools. I need to get into more schools. And so the entrepreneurs in me kicked in, and I made a bunch of postcards that had the covers of my books at the time. And I got on the internet again. I learned how to use it when I got old. And I found the addresses to every school teacher, every English teacher in the state, libraries, and I sent them all this postcard that said, invite me to come to your school, talk to your students about being an author. And I have to admit those presentations are a little more wild because the kids are littler and they're easier to entertain, right? And I have a PowerPoint that I flip through and the kids are screaming and freaking out and their teachers are embarrassed. Awesome. But college kids, I figured, I better not do that. So I was getting invited to speak at schools all over the place. Well, once you get invited to speak at a school, you say, now I'm already in town, how can I speak at the neighboring school? So the entrepreneur side of you kicks in again, and you call up the other school and say, I'm already speaking, the elementary school across town, I'm going to be there anyways. How about I come over? And so now they're like, oh man, this guy's really important, right? He'd be invited to speak at our competing school. We don't have no author at our school. Let's get him to come speak at our school. And so you go over there and speak. And it's all the opportunity of being an entrepreneur to combine with whatever it is that you make, whatever it is that you make and do. If you're an entrepreneur, you can figure out a way to make some money on it. And so that's what I did. And I in more and more schools, and some days I'd be there, and it'd be like a whole student body. It was like 600 kids. I'd be like, this is pretty wild, How many kids have I spoke to now? Thousands and thousands of kids that I've been able to meet and engage, and guess what they do? So the entrepreneur said, first, I think, well, they're going to buy books. Well, I don't know about you guys, and I didn't think of it till I failed a few times, but little kids don't show up to school with cash, And so there I am, I got all my books all set out, and price tags on everything, and I'm like, yeah, you want to come buy some books after? And they're all like, oh, man, throw me money. So little kids also have no dignity, right? So they all line up and want free books. And as a bookkeeper decided to be an entrepreneur, it doesn't work out very good if you go to get a free book. So I thought, how am I going to solve this problem? And I thought, well, okay, we'll do a pre-order form. And so a part of the packet that I would send to the school that would give them the press releases, I just learned you have to do everything for them, and if you make it easy, they'll do it. So I'd give them the press releases, I would give them all my links, and then I would give them order forms that they could give each teacher, with the instruction that if each teacher would hold that up in front of classes, anybody have any book money today, a couple kids would bring their money and get on the list, and it would remind all the rest of them. That worked pretty good. So then I got thinking, how the hell do we motivate these guys? What else can we do to help myself? So I said, how about this? I'll give $2. Every book I sell, I'll give $2 back to the library. And then it really took off. Because as an entrepreneur, if you find partners and you can let them, as they say on Shark Tank, wet their beak a little bit, let them get a little bit of money also, all of a sudden their motivation to help you goes up. And so we started doing that. We'd give a little bit of money back to the school, but sometimes it'd be a lot, sometimes it would be a little. But you always sold more books when you let someone else have a little piece of the pie. And so when you think of whatever entrepreneur project that you have going on, whatever it is that you're thinking of doing, you've got to ask yourself, how can I help other people to expand and grow and to become a benefit from this also? And the more you do that, the more successful that you'll be. Now I'm at an interesting pinnacle in my writing because with the exception of the Sam exclusive is written kind of more for just families in general. But these other 3 books are written for middle school kids and junior high school kids. Now, there are adults and older kids who like the genres, middle grade and young adult, But Twilight showed us that, right? That all these moms were like in love with these. There's a funny YouTube video about that somebody's made a rock song about, basically my wife's in love with a 17-year-old kid. How did this happen, And it's Edward and Jacob, right? But, anyways. I can think of Edward and Jacob, lost my train of thought. But basically, you've got to find a way for some other people to get involved, for them to start helping, for them to start making money as well, and it will greatly increase your chance of success. Trying to think of what. Yeah, here's where I was going with the Twilight thing, right? Because older people read books for younger people sometimes. That happens, and I've had some success with that. Most of my reviews on Amazon are adults, and it also turns out that little kids don't write Amazon reviews. So no matter how many thousands of books you sell, you don't get a lot of reviews because a 6th grader doesn't go do that, right? And so I got thinking about it, and this is part of learning the market. A really popular genre right now is for writing for kids your age and maybe between your age and like 28, and especially ladies that are 18 to 28 is kind of the new market. And so as an entrepreneur, I'm being adaptable to that. The 2 books I'm working on now are written to that age group. And I have one that's kind of an American Idol spin-off. The hero is a girl. She does have a boyfriend. You got to have some romance in there to make it work out. And she has this trial ahead of her of trying to make it in the music business. And another one is a bank heist book where the bank robbers are all girls, and the youngest one who starts the group is 18, and the others are a few years older than her. And so part of being an entrepreneur is you've got to be adaptable that way. What's happening with the market? What's hot right now? And there's some authors who would say, I just want to write what's in my heart. If people read it fine, if they don't, fine. Well, that's okay if you want to be poor. But if you want to make some money, you got to treat this like a business, and you got to find out what's popular, and you got to write based on what's popular. And it is the same with whatever it is you're doing, whatever you have in your mind. If you have a product or service in mind, you've got to be flexible with that. Now, several months ago, I don't remember when Sean Brenchley came here to speak to you. But Sean Brenchley is a good friend of mine. He and I work snow together. Have lots of good stories. Were any of you here when Sean Brenchley spoke? He was the bigwig from Vivint that was here. I won't disclose how many millions he's worth now because of his entrepreneurship skill, but he could buy us all a pretty nice car, and not that enough, just for the record. President Carlton should be contacting him about getting his name on a building somewhere, because he made a lot of money with that. But one thing I noticed their product did was they went from burglar alarms into all this home automation. They saw the future, and they saw, hey, senior citizens who are living alone could take advantage of this technology, and so they started shifting around, and they make all this other crazy stuff that have little to do with the burglar alarm because they're being fluid with what the market requires. And so whatever it is that you're going to do, you've got to figure that out. You've got to figure out how can I continually adjust and adapt. And again, because you're self-employed, that's all up to you to do. If you have a board of directors or a boss, how many of you work for somebody right now? Okay? And if you have a good idea that you think could revolutionize where you work, you go tell it to your boss, and what usually happens? Nothing. Because they usually work for someone else too, and it's just extra work with no benefits. So why would anybody want to go the extra mile? It happens all the time. When you work for yourself and you have a good idea, you crunch some numbers, you ask your consultants, you listen to the right people only when they say the right things, and you make a decision and you go with it. And it's become a really popular thing right now. That show Shark Tank that's on TV. That's what it's all about. How many of you guys watch Shark Tank? They should give you credit for that, Alan. You should give them credit for watching Shark Tank because they come in there and it really dives into, always about the numbers. What are your sales, right? That's people come in with this song and dance, and the sharks can't wait to say, what are your sales? And if it's like, $16,000 over how long? 20 years. They kick them out of there. So it's entrepreneurship is really an up-and-coming thing right now. And you guys are the generation that's going to do it. No other generation like yours has had the opportunities that you have. Now, obviously, there have been successful entrepreneurs in the past. I had a meeting the other day with the son of the guy that started Marriott Hotels, and talk about entrepreneurs. You know, I mean that the way that they built that business and expanded and changed and grew based on the market was awesome. But it was done like 80 years ago. You know, but now because of the internet, because of the push for entrepreneurs, you guys have an opportunity to leave this college with all the knowledge that you learned, but go to work for yourself. And maybe even more importantly, you'll have the opportunity to create jobs for other people. And that is so vital. That is so important to our economy right now. Most of the rich guys in America would say that it's entrepreneurs and the small business that's going to turn this country around. It's not the great big corporations that have the $1 million salaries and all the bonuses and the jets and all that kind of stuff. It's people like you who have an idea, you have some schooling and training so you know what to do with the idea, and you get out there and you hit the streets and you make it happen. And we live in that world. We live in the United States of America. It's still the best country in the world to do this kind of thing. With that, you may or may not have a lot of questions. Like most of the time when I speak, it's to people who are all here to learn about writing books. And man, it's just like, I'm like a rock star in there. But I realize that if you may or may not ask some questions, if you do, we have a few minutes. If not, we'll end. Any question? Okay, right here with the time.
Is there anything that you did to market it specifically on Amazon that helped?
Yes. Amazon, the best thing you can do on Amazon, of course, is get the feel. Oh yeah, his question was, right, I forgot. His question was anything I did to market on Amazon. And the best thing on Amazon, and it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, the best thing for Amazon itself is those comments of when people go and put feedback and rate your product. That's the best thing you can do. But because that's hard to control, you send everybody to Amazon. When I start posting advertisement, instead of sending them to my website or my Facebook page, I send them to Amazon. And when you do that, it puts a picture of your product right on your online advertisement, and they click on it, and they're already in the checkout line. Right? And so, yes, Amazon is giant, and so you've got to be figuring out how to work out Amazon. Yes, with the little blue hat on.
How much does it cost for you to get a book out?
See, that's the beautiful thing. It used to be that you'd spend the $10,000 and get a bunch of books and have them in your garage. Now, especially if you learn how to do it yourself, it doesn't cost you anything to get them on Amazon. And you don't pay for them, you don't pay for the printed ones until they're sold. So whatever you're doing from an entrepreneurship standpoint, if you could get that where you have no overhead, there's no risk, it's just your time, you know. Now I hired people to design these covers and things like that, but it's depending on who you hire, it's hundreds of dollars, not thousands. Okay, right here in the back. Right in the back.
What got you interested in the idea of writing books? Like, did you love English?
No, I hate. That's what got me interested in writing books. I love English. No, I was horrible. I was horrible at English. And I grew up in Nephi. I went to Juab High School. And in fact, this book, the main character has this total Western drawl. He has the worst grammar in the world. And so I could just write my own regular language. And somebody's like, man, it's awesome how you made this guy sound like a total redneck. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I was trying to do. So no, but I wished I would have. And I guess one thing I'll say to you guys is it's not okay to be here and not know what you want to do. You know, I mean, you used to be like, oh, I'm just going to go to snow, figure out what I'm going to do later. I mean, if that's where you're at, I'm sorry for you. But how much better would it be if you could figure it out right now? Expend the mental energy, take 6 hours less of doing whatever you do on the internet or playing games, and decide what the heck am I really going to do? Because the sooner you can decide that, the sooner you prepare, and the better. Yes?
When you're writing books and you get that case of writer's block that's next in face, how do you push past that wall?
Writer's block is brutal. I've been lucky for the most part. Once I get going, the story's exciting enough to me that that doesn't happen. The other thing you can do to present writer's block is plan this thing out in advance. You know, when you build a house, you got a blueprint. When you write a book, if you make a blueprint, plan it out in advance. You know, you can still get stuck on like, I don't know how to phrase this. You know, sometimes there's an emotion I want to catch, and it's like on the tip of my tongue, so to speak, but I can't quite get it out. because I have an outline, I can make a note in red, come back to this, something about, and I can write a very, really rough draft, and then I can move on, because I know what the rest of the house looks like. And then when it'll come to me, and then I can go back to the places marked in red and fill it in. Yes, right here, front row. How many what? How many employees do I have? I count as 3. I don't have any full-time employees, but I do employ people as we go. If I need some help with marketing, if I need a cover design, if I need editing done, you hire somebody on a temporary basis. Good question. Right over here. Yes, but I'm not very smart like The Hobbit, those high fantasy, and Harry Potter, how they create, I'm not that smart. But this is wild and completely fantasy, and Mission Invisible is mild fantasy, but it's not the sorcerers and fire-breathing stuff and all that as much, but they're not in the real world either. They're somewhere kind of in between. They're in the real world, but the people have powers that they shouldn't have. You can have, take this one. Try me. This is better for somebody older anyways. Mom, go on this one. Hey, question right here.
What kind of religious books were you going to be writing?
I'll tell you, I don't know how many of you guys know what, I realize not everybody in the world is Mormon, right? Big news flat. So I was going to be a seminary teacher. That's what I went to college for. And so I thought I would write all these religious books that like if I was a BYU professor one day. And I went through that, I did it, and reached the point where I chose business instead. So that's what I was going to do. Yes? Yes, and I did, it's true, I did write a production called the Mormon Handcart Pageant. And that's probably a better, they need to have me come to the Institute and tell that story because we'll all be bottled off the whole time. I don't think you can make people cry in public school. I think it's against the law.
Are any of your books on audio?
Not yet, but I just had a discussion with somebody yesterday about that. And again, with technology, guys, to make your books on CD or download is so much easier than it used to be. So, good question. Yes?
So, some of us have problems coming up with enough information to fill like a 5-page essay.
Yeah.
So, how do you come up with so much information to fill, 100, 200 pages and keep it interesting and engaging?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I will say that is the area I did stand out at Snow. Oh, the question is how did you come up with enough information to keep it interesting? Because some have a hard time with a 500-word essay, right? And that was one area I was good at Snow was I could write. And I didn't realize I would do poorly on tests. I'd do so well on the papers that I would manage to do okay. But it is hard to find the ideas. And but that's not the hardest part. Everywhere I go, people come to me and say, I have an awesome idea for a story. Will you write it? And I'm like, man, I got a stack of ideas this big of my own. And so it is hard to do, but if you can't find it, it's probably boring and just move on anyways. If it's not there, it's not there. Right here in the back.
Kind of, because we kind of raise a segue question. But when you deal with a market that has religious beliefs or any sort of beliefs that are very like publicized, especially like theology, do you have a perspective or just advice to give to entrepreneurs or where you draw that line between actually exploiting those beliefs or capital gain but yet still kind of that line between confidence and
What he's talking about is if you know something morally or religiously, and if you think, well, I wouldn't mind writing, for example, if I want to write a book about that, how do I get paid? How do I charge money for telling about something that I believe from my religion? Basically, I know it's harder than that. I should give him the microphone. That is sometimes a challenging thing. With the Handcart Pageant, when we wrote that, the whole deal was this isn't going to cost anything. No money's going to be made. It's going to be free to get into this thing. It's going to be a huge expense to put it on. We'll figure out, like entrepreneurs do, where to get the money, but we didn't charge for that. But at the same time, I think seminary teachers, for example, they get paid to do what they do. And if you get asked to speak at your religion church, you probably don't get paid for it. But if you're a full-time employee, you do. And so it's a fine line. You have to. And nobody likes it when somebody uses a particular religion to establish credibility in a business deal. I don't know if you've ever had that happen. By the way, I'm such and such in my church. Nice to meet you. I want to sell you something. So you turn off. Yes?
So what do you do if, have you ever had editors that wanted you to write stuff that you didn't like
you know, even the editors that I use always don't agree with me. Oh, she's questioned, do you have editors that want you to write something you don't believe in? I have editors that don't agree with me, but also I choose, because I work for myself, I can choose editors who aren't going to ask me to put that kind of stuff in. But I will say that I was at a writer's conference and there was some New York agents there, and a lady in the audience during a panel asked these New York City people, do we have to put all this smut in our books to get them published? And the panel started to laugh. And it was almost like insulting to everyone who was worried about that. And so the moderator said, why are you guys laughing? And they said, no, it's just funny because only in Utah would someone say, do we really have to put that crap in there? Because everywhere else in the world they're saying, how much smut can we put in and still have it be in the school? You know? And so you have to fight with that, and that's a huge thing if you get a publisher. Believe me, Stephanie Meyer would have got a lot of heat to advance the relationship between Edward and Bella during that whole process. But because of her belief, she didn't. And Hollywood would have wanted that different, I guarantee you. There were some questions over here. There's still some, or did you give up? Okay, right over here.
So, like, how many total books do you have? Like, you wrote,
You know, how many copies have I sold? And that's always a tricky question, because until it becomes millions and millions and millions, if it's not worth bragging about, you don't want to talk about it, right? And it's a little bit like saying, dude, how much money do you make? You know? But I will tell you that as an entrepreneur and an author, you'll sell as many books as you put in the time to sell. And there's no limit on it. That if you have the time and you put in the work, you'll sell them. And then the hope is, and what we all want as authors, is to get to that point where you finally hit something that's on autopilot. That you almost accidentally kick out a book at the right time in society, and the thing just takes off. Now, I know most of you guys, none of you guys have read any of the 50 Shades of Grey books, right? But I have a friend who wrote a book at that time, and it was called A Different Blue. And the cover was similar to 50 Shades of Grey. It had a color in the title. And when the 50 Shades of Grey series ended, people flocked to Amazon to say, where can I find more of this? And they come across her book, A Different Blue. It's nothing like 50 Shades of Grey, but she went to the New York Times bestseller list with it. And I don't think she did it. Don't get me wrong, she's very talented and smart, but she did not know enough. She was asking me for advice, so I know she did not know enough to do all that. A lot of it was, I'm not taking anything away from it, but a lot of it was the right place at the right time. We're probably out of time, aren't we?
We are.
Okay.
But I want to go ahead and just give you a
Who wants this?
big hand. Oh, everybody else. You got 16 or 18 more in there?
I got another t-shirt. You can. This is their star. Dude, put on the team, man.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brent Boswell. We appreciate you being here. This was a great presentation to end our semester on. We appreciate you wrapping things up with us in that way. We really enjoyed it. You still have work to do, but this is the last presentation. So make sure to follow everything on campus. And then as you leave, if Brittany Johnson, Ashton Jones, Russell Finkelson, and Dylan Boss, if you're here, come on up in a second.